Welcome back to So You Really Want to Learn Latin, and today we are going to be revising some of the work we've been doing recently on our use of the subjunctive. Okay, so we are coming to the end of chapter 6 in book 3. We've sorted out the pluperfect subjunctive, we've looked at temporal and causal clauses. We've looked at the use of cum plus the pluperfect subjunctive to mean when or since. And we've even had a little look at two more irregular verbs, edo and phio. And we're pretty much set to move on into the next chapter. But we've done a lot recently, and I just want to spend this video running through some basic sentences using all this stuff we've been using, bringing it all together, so that we are ready for the next stage when we get there. Okay, so we'll start easy peasy going Latin into English, okay, and then we'll finish with a little bit going the other way. Okay, so I thought we'd just run through some of the sentences that we've got here in exercise 6.19. And we will just pick a few at random, okay? We'll go for a nice easy one first, number 1. Okay, so Romani Tam superbi fiebant ut omnes eos timerent. Now, when you're doing this sort of thing, I always say you've got to nail the construction, you know? We're now at the stage where pretty much every bit of Latin you see, there will be a construction in it. Okay, it might be a very simple construction, but increasingly what you will see is something with something in it that just makes you think a little bit. Okay, now in this one, that word tam should kind of trigger a little alarm bell. Okay, tam meaning so. And Romani tam superbi fiebant. Okay, the Romans, now fiebant, there's our new verb that we've just met, fio meaning I am made or I become. So fiebant became, the Romans became tam superbi, so proud. Now, as you're saying that in English, you should be thinking that the next natural word is that. And so it is in Latin. You've got tam superbi diddly 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 ut. Okay? So that construction is a consecutive clause. It's a result clause. Okay. So the Romans became so proud ut omnes eos timerent, that omnes, everyone, timerent, feared eos, them. And notice timerent is in the imperfect subjunctive. It's in the subjunctive because it's a consecutive clause, ut plus the subjunctive. It's in the imperfect subjunctive because it's a historic tense following the historic main verb fiebant. Okay? And that, I hope you remember, is called the sequence of tenses, where the main verb and any subordinate clause, verb, are in the same sequence of time, either primary or historic. Okay, now I have a look at a slightly long one. Number 2, we have cum Romani poinos supera vicent, urbem eorum, id circo deleverunt, ne ab eis iterum vincerentur. Okay, so there's quite a lot going on there. You know, that's quite a chunky sentence. Cum Romani poinos supera vicent. Now, cum, you know, we know now. It's a preposition meaning with. Cum plus the ablative means with. But it's also a conjunction. And cum plus the pluperfect subjunctive is a pretty standard way of translating when. Okay, so cum Romani poinos supera vicent. When the Romans had conquered the Carthaginians, okay, supera vicent is in the pluperfect subjunctive coming after cum, meaning when something had. Okay, when the Romans had overcome the Carthaginians. Orbem eorum id Cirico deleverunt. Now, id Cirico is one of these signpost words that I've talked about. These are these little words that tell you that a sentence hasn't got to the end. Okay, we are therefore avoiding the worm. And if you don't remember the worm, go back and have a look at how the worm works, or rather how it shouldn't work. We don't want worms. So you see irkirko, and you know that it's going to be giving... What we're saying now is going to be explained later in the sentence. Okay? So, urbem eorum id Cirico deleverunt. They destroyed their city, urbem eorum, the city of them. But we've got this word id Cirico. Now, you don't need to translate it. It's only there to tell you that the sentence doesn't finish at deleverunt. You know, you couldn't put a full stop there. And if you were a worm, you couldn't cut it in half and the other half would wriggle off into the distance. Okay, so id Cirico says, keep listening, there's more coming. Okay, so they destroyed their city, and sure enough, we've now got the word ne. Okay, ne ab eis iterum vincerentur. Now, ne is used as the negative of ut, okay, in a final clause. Its basic translation is lest. In other words, in order that not. Okay, so lest vincerentur, lest they be conquered, iterum again, ab eis, by them. Okay, so that whole thing, when the Romans had overcome the Carthaginians, they destroyed their city lest they be conquered by them again. Okay, that's why they destroyed the Carthaginian city, because they didn't want the Carthaginians coming back to beat them in battle. Okay, so great stuff there. We've got all sorts of things. We've got cum plus a pluperfect subjunctive, meaning when. We've got a signpost word, id Cirico, warning you not to kind of lose patience with the sentence and think you can put a full stop. And you've got a negative final clause, ne plus the subjunctive. And notice that vincerentur was in the imperfect subjunctive because the main verb in this sentence is deleverunt, they destroyed. Okay? And that also, by the way, if you're being really kind of fussy, deleverunt could have meant they have destroyed. But the fact that it's followed by vincerentur in the imperfect subjunctive tells you that it did not mean they have destroyed, which would be a primary tense. It's they destroyed, which is a historic tense. Okay, so, you know, accurate translation of Latin is what this is all about. But it's such fun, because you've got to work out what rules are we following here. And if I obey the rules, translating out of Latin, I'll get a perfect English translation. Of course, the way to really hone that skill is to learn to go into Latin in the first place, which is why I make such a big thing about doing that. And we'll, hold on to your hats, we'll do some of that in just a moment. But we'll just do a couple more of these. Okay, we'll go for number 5. Civis Romanus, nomine Tiberius Gracchus, servos adeo timebat, ut in senatum festinaverit, et patres monuerit. Okay, Civis Romanus, a Roman citizen. Nomine Tiberius Gracchus, called Tiberius Gracchus. Okay, nothing funny yet. Servos adeo timebat. Right. Feared the slaves. Adeo. Now, adeo means to such an extent. Okay? And it's another clue. Well, it's not a clue. It is a signpost that this is going into a consecutive clause. He did it to such an extent. It's a bit like using tam, you know, with an adjective or an adverb. Adeo, to such an extent. Okay, so he feared them to such an extent, ut, there it is, that, in senatum festinaverit, that he hurried into the Senate, okay, et patres monuerit, and warned the patres, the fathers. Now the fathers are the term that we use for the senators. Okay, it's a mark of respect. Okay, now there's just a couple of things to look at there. First of all, notice, I mean, it's just a minor point, but it's not in senatum, it's in senatum, and that's because the word in is an I followed by an N, obviously in, and then the next word begins with the letter S. And in Latin, a vowel followed by either NS or NF is always lengthened. So you end up with in senatum, not in senatum. Okay, very minor point. But, much more importantly, why were those two verbs at the end of that sentence, festinaverit and monuerit? Well, first of all, what were they? Okay, now, these are the ones that look like future perfects, okay, but they clearly can't be future perfects. That wouldn't make any sort of sense. But anyway, it's after ut, and ut is followed by the subjunctive. So if ut is followed by the subjunctive, these two words must be in the subjunctive, and sure enough, they are. They are in the perfect subjunctive. Okay. And then you ask yourself, well, why on earth are they in the perfect subjunctive? Because a consecutive clause is normally, you know, a kind of main verb followed with a so word or an adeo kind of thing, and then ut, and then a subjunctive, which is normally the imperfect subjunctive, assuming that the main verb was a historic tense. But if you remember, in a consecutive clause, if the subjunctive used is the perfect subjunctive, that is used to emphasize the fact that the result actually happened. Okay? So it's just emphasizing the result of the main verb. So, a Roman citizen called Tiberius Gracchus feared the slaves to such an extent that he actually hurried into the Senate and warned the senators. Okay? Okay, we'll do one more. These sentences, actually, they're kind of following on, you know, a kind of logical order, but I'm just going to jump into one of them. We've got agros civibus dare id ciraco volebat, ut illi ruri habitari possent. Okay? Main verb volebat. He wanted, dare, to give, agros, the fields, civibus, to the citizens. Okay? He wanted to give fields to the citizens. And then we've got that word id ciraco. Okay? It's a signpost word. It tells us that we haven't finished the sentence yet. And if you're patient, you'll find out why. So he wanted to give fields to the citizens, ut, in order that illi, they, in other words, those citizens, possent, would be able, habitare, to live, ruri. Now, ruri, in the countryside. Okay? Rus, it means the countryside. And its locative case is ruri, okay? There are some other kind of slightly funny ones like that. Humi means on the ground. Ruri, in the countryside. Look up rus. It's a lovely little third declension neuter noun. Rus, ruris, neuter the countryside. With this, you know, slightly peculiar locative, ruri. Okay, I said I'd do one more, but in fact I'm going to do one more, because I've got my balls on number 10. Hostibus victis miles fortis dux factus est. I always think when you're kind of making progress with this language, you've got to keep remembering that you have to remember it all, not just the bits you were doing most recently. So when you see hostibus victis, you think, oh, hang on, what's that? That's an ablative absolute. Okay, so just because we're now doing, use of the subjunctive and final clauses and consecutive clauses, don't forget all the other stuff we've done. So ablative absolutes. Hostibus victis, with the enemy having been conquered, miles fortis dux factus est. The soldier, miles, factus est, literally was made or just became, fortis dux, a brave leader. Okay, so notice factus est, that looks like the passive of facio, doesn't it? Obviously it does. Facio, facere, faci, factum. But actually, facio doesn't have a passive. The passive is supplied by this verb fio. Fio, fieri, factus, sum. You might think that's a slightly weird distinction, and in a sense it is, but you can't say, there is no imperfect passive of the verb facio. You have to use fio to mean I am made or I become. Okay, right, now, as promised, let's go the other way for just a few moments. So if we have a crack at, after the Roman forces had captured the citadel, they put the enemy to flight. Okay, now, lots of ways of doing this, really. We could, for example, use cum and the pluperfect subjunctive and say when the Roman forces had captured the citadel. So that would be cum copiae Romani arcem capiscent. Okay, cum plus the pluperfect subjunctive when they had captured. Or you could do an ablative absolute, and you could say with the citadel having been captured, the Roman forces went on and did something else. So that would be ablative of arx. It's a feminine third declension noun. So arce capta, with the citadel having been captured. And then on we go. Copiae Romani, the Roman forces, put the enemy to flight. Hostes fugaverunt. Now, fugo fugari is the Latin for I put to flight. I notice it's not actually in the vocab at the back of that, which isn't very handy. But anyway, that's the verb to use. Okay, so two ways of doing that front end. After the Roman forces had captured the citadel, either as a slightly, laboured temporal clause, cum copiae Romani arcem capiscent, and then what happened next, or the ablative absolute. Okay, let's have a go at another one. So many soldiers had been killed that the rest were forced to accept peace. Okay, so you can see that this is a consecutive clause. So many that something happened. So, tot milites interfecti errant, so many soldiers had been killed. Ut, okay, and now we're going into the result of that. Ut, the rest, caeteri, okay, were forced to accept peace. Were forced, we'll do last, to accept peace, parcem ecipere, cogerentur, okay, they were forced, and that's an imperfect subjunctive because the sequence of tenses tells you it must be historic. And if we had wanted to really emphasize the fact that they were forced, we'd have gone for the perfect subjunctive, and it would have to be passive, so that would have been coarcti sint. Okay. Now, as before, there are various ways of doing this. You could, for example, have done another ablative absolute there at the beginning. So many soldiers had been killed, you could have said, with so many soldiers having been killed, so tot militibus interfectis, okay, ablative absolute, get it out of the way, that's dealt with that business, and then just say the rest were false. Cateri parcem accipere coacti sunt, and not have a subjunctive because there's no ut. Okay, so the great thing about language is there are different ways of saying the same thing, and the great fun in translating from English into Latin is you can kind of choose which construction you're most comfortable with, and if you don't really like consecutive clauses, there's often a way around it, not always. The point is you need to be comfortable doing it either way. And then we're just going to do one more. The Roman general feared the enemy to such an extent that he destroyed all their buildings. Okay, the Roman general, Imperator Romanus, or Dux Romanus, feared the enemy, hostes timuit, or timebat probably, because it's an ongoing fearing that he's doing, to such an extent, adeo. So, adeo timebat ut, okay, and here comes the result of his fearing them, that he destroyed all their buildings, ut omnia aedificia, all the buildings, you can say eorum if you want to make it obvious that it's their ones, ut omnia aedificia eorum, he destroyed. Now, deleo, but it's got to be in the subjunctive because it's coming after ut in a consecutive clause. Deleret. Okay, I think that will do for now. Right, next, that nails chapter 6 in the book. So next time we're going to move on and look at some more constructions. We've got indirect command coming up. Then we're going to have indirect question. We're going to have qui plus a subjunctive. All sorts of fun in chapter 7. But until then, keep up the good work. Go back over your notes. Keep writing this stuff down. You know, check that you're happy with the various constructions we've done. Check that you can form these tenses. You know, it's all very well if I say, oh, well, it's ut and the perfect subjunctive, and you can't remember how to form the perfect subjunctive. Okay, so sorry about this, but just go back and really check you've got this stuff nailed. And I'll see you back here on this channel very soon.